Bueno, pues bienvenidos a todos a la entrega de este mes de Access User Groups España. Bienvenidos. Hoy vamos a hablar de un tema que habéis preguntado muchísimas veces, que es muy recurrente en todos los foros y que, si bien se resuelve muchas veces, todos estáis deseando ver en vivo cómo se hace esto, que parece tan complicado. Así que hoy tenemos con nosotros a un experto en el tema, a Peter Cole. Peter, welcome, bienvenido. Peter es un gran experto de Access, ha colaborado con muchísima gente en el mundo de Access y aunque le gusta estar un poquito en la sombra, pues siempre está ahí trabajando de manera muy activa. Así que, how are you, Peter?
I'm ready, yeah.
Dan, it's all you. Todo tuyo.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, I'm going to be talking about updating the API calls in Access to use 32 and 64-bit.
Hoy voy a hablarles de cómo actualizar los APIs de Access en 32 y 64 bits.
Right. So most of the samples on the web, unfortunately, are still 32-bit. We're getting some more 64-bit, but an awful lot of 32.
Desafortunadamente, la mayoría de los ejemplos que se encuentran en la web son hechos para 32 bits y no para 64.
So, as 64-bit Office was not available in 2010, my focus is obviously from that version onwards. So I won't be dealing with anything prior to 2010. So no hash VBA7s in the code that I'll be talking about.
La versión Office de 64 bits se introdujo en 2010, así que hoy el enfoque va a ser en versiones de 2010 y después, y no anteriores.
Right, we're going to have a look at the very simplest of API calls. We declare our function, the get username. There are probably better ways of doing it than using an API nowadays, but this is a good example, very simple. So I'm just going to step through before you go speaking there. And
Este ejemplo utiliza el API get username para darles un ejemplo sencillo para ver la conversión.
So we have, after the function, we've got the name that we're going to use in VBA. We've got the library it's coming from, which is ADV API 32.dll. And then the alias name, which you can't quite see on the end there, it's get username A. That is the actual name which Windows uses. So that has to be in the correct case. So the uppercase G, U, and N and A all need to be that case. And the parameter we've got there is a string because it's going to return.
Se declara la función en la library ADVAPI32 y tiene el nombre, el alias get username A, y como todas las llamadas de API en Windows, tiene que utilizar correctamente letras mayúsculas y minúsculas. El parámetro es el IP buffer, que es un string.
Just a point on the alias. We've had this in previous discussions. It's the wrong way round, really, because the real name is the name after the alias, not the name after the function, backwards from the way SQL works.
Uno puede confundirse un poco porque la orden de los nombres get username y get username A es al inverso de, por ejemplo, cómo se utiliza en SQL.
To make API calls compatible with 64-bit, we have to use PTR safe. But it doesn't actually do anything apart from making the compiler know that the 64-bit adjustment has been done.
Para hacer que una llamada al API sea compatible con 64 bits, se utiliza PTR safe, pointer safe o safe pointer, y no, uno se puede esperar que ya esto resuelve todo, pero no, con la excepción de unos pocos casos. Pointer safe informa al compiler que la expresión de declare ha sido modificada para utilizar parámetros y retornar valores que son compatibles con 64 bits. No hace nada aparte de esto.
Where do we find the details of 64-bit declares? We can find them in a text file produced by Microsoft.
Go ahead.
That looks like that.
Hay un archivo, Win32 API pointer safe.txt, que ven aquí en la pantalla, donde tienen Microsoft la información de cómo utilizar los APIs Windows en 64 bits.
It includes in there 1,550 declare statements, which are suitable for both 32 and 64-bit, hundreds of constants, and a lot of user-defined types. It's not terribly convenient to use.
No es muy sencillo de utilizar, tiene unos 1500 declaraciones declare, varios user-defined types, tipos definidos por usuario, y muchos constants, como ven en la pantalla.
As you can see, lots of constants, lots of types. Now, to get around the problem of 32-bit and 64-bit memory addresses being a different size, Microsoft introduced the long PTR data type. In 64-bit Office, it becomes a long, and in 32-bit Office, it becomes a long. So you don't have to worry about writing code which changes between the lengths of variables, because long PTR will automatically adjust.
Hay un tipo de data long pointer utilizando en Office 64 bits. Se llama long, o sea, 32 y 32, supongo, y que eso sí que con este variable se puede utilizar los APIs en 64 bits.
We're going to look at the get username. I'm going to call up a copy of that.
Aquí vamos a ver la función get username.
Can you see the code?
Yes.
As we can see, we've got a problem here because we've not got a PTR safe in there, and we don't know whether anything else might change. So what we're going to do is we're going to call up, rather than go into the text file, we're going to call up my API viewer. And we're going to be looking for this get username A. So rather than typing it, we'll just highlight it. Copy it. And then we'll open my API viewer, which is available for free. I've been doing some work on this. I've done a Spanish translation with the help of Google Translate. So it's pretty rough, but it's a starting point.
Aquí tengo un visualizador de APIs que está disponible gratis para quien quiera. Y también he añadido una función de traducciones utilizando Google Translate.
What I should say is it's table driven so that somebody who speaks Spanish properly can adjust it and then it will make more sense. So if
Utilizo tablas para la traducción, así que quien quiera puede abrir la tabla de traducción de inglés a español y corregir el español si quiere.
Hopefully that means something to you.
Ojalá entiendan lo que aparece en pantalla.
Está muy bien, muy bien.
Peter, he says it's very good.
Yeah, I can remember that much Spanish. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So we need the name after the alias, which is what we have just pasted or copied in. So we'll paste that in and hit the enter. And that has now got the correct version of that for compatibility with 32 and 64-bit. There isn't anything actually else to change.
Entonces, como pueden ver, entré el nombre del alias, get username A, y luego me dio la versión utilizando ptr save, y ya está hecha la conversión.
Now, having hit the return and having displayed that information is now stored on the clipboard. So we can go back to our code and paste it in, and we can delete the old one. And now we can debug, compile, no problems. And then if we can just run that. And we've now got a 64-bit compatible version of that bit of code.
Y eso es lo último que se necesitó para convertir la función getUsername de 32 a una versión compatible con 64 bits, utilizando la herramienta, copiando la versión actualizada y ponerla aquí en nuestro código.
It's just going through what we've just done. That's the English version, which was there up until a couple of days ago.
Está más revisando los pasos que hemos hecho.
So the question is, how big is the updating problem that we've got?
Ahora, la pregunta es de qué tamaño, cuán difícil es el problema de hacer las actualizaciones.
I've got another sample with some more declares in it. I'm just going to drag that across.
Ahora les voy a enseñar un ejemplo un poco más complejo.
So we can see in this one, there are quite a few functions which need updating.
Aquí pueden ver una decena de funciones que tienen que actualizarse.
So what we're going to do, we're going to run our scanner.
Ahora utilizando la misma herramienta mía.
Oh, just left the form behind. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. That is going to look at how many declare statements there are in a database or in a folder with a number of databases in it, so you can check without having to go into each file. So we're going to select a file, and it's the all samples file that we were just looking at with all those in there. And we're going to process that database.
Bueno, la herramienta aquí en este formulario, como ven, puedo buscar dentro de una base de datos o de una serie de bases de datos en una carpeta, en un folder, y automáticamente la herramienta pasa por cada base de datos para encontrar expresiones declare en el código VBA.
So what that's telling us there is that there are a total of 38 declare statements in there, which obviously would be a little bit time consuming to update, but at least we know how many there are.
Y ha encontrado a 38 declaraciones declare en VBA.
We've got a number of naught there, which are ones which aren't in the 1550 of the text file. So fortunately, all of these are declare statements that we know exactly what needs to be put in. Well, we're pretty sure that we know what's to be put in. There are a few mistakes in the Microsoft text file, and there are also a lot of misunderstandings.
La línea número de declaraciones reconocidas, que aquí es 0, es cuando hay una expresión declare, un statement declare, que no se encuentra en este archivo de Microsoft, que tiene los 1500 declare statements.
Hopefully that message makes sense in Spanish.
Ojalá pueda entender este diálogo.
Se entiende, se entiende.
He says yes, it's understood.
Okay, great. So we've now seen how big the problem is.
Ahora entendemos que tenemos 38 declaraciones.
Both the API viewer and this scanner are free for anybody to use. The viewer is an AccessDB, so that you can modify it to your own requirements if you want to. Obviously, things might not be quite the way you want it.
El visualizador de APIs también es gratis, una herramienta mía como el scanner, y es en forma de CCDB y que puede modificarlo si quiere.
The scanner will be supplied as an ACCDE because I use a couple of things from Everything Access, VB Watchdog and VB Mappy, which obviously I can't give away for free because they are licensed products.
El escáner es ACCDE, aplicación, porque tiene código de otras partes, código para el cual yo no tengo licencia para distribuirlo gratis.
Right, we're going to have a look at some more scans of some other files.
Vamos a escanear otros archivos.
I haven't translated that bit yet. We've got one with an unknown call.
Y un ejemplo que tiene una llamada desconocida.
So we're going to process that. It's telling us what module it's processing. And it's told us that there's only one in there and it doesn't know anything about that one.
Y como han visto, esa declaración es declare no es reconocido porque no se encuentra en este archivo texto de Microsoft.
So what it's done, it's made a copy of the bits which are unknown so that they can be emailed to me for having a look at to see whether I've got some information on what they should be. We can have a look at what's going to be sent, and we've got, you can't see that, can you?
Yes.
There we go. Obviously I've got an unknown API or library in there with all the X's. And I've also got the code in which that was called. The thing with APIs, we often use them in combination so that just having an API on its own, an incorrect one, doesn't allow any testing in the combination which would normally be used in. So that's why I extract the code.
Muchas veces se utilizan las llamadas a las APIs en combinación con otros. Entonces, tengo en el código no solamente la llamada, la declaración declare, pero también el código donde se utiliza.
And you can email that to me by clicking there. That will have created an email with a zip of those two files that we've just looked at and a few other details there.
Con ese botón genero automáticamente un email que tiene un zip, archivo zip de esos dos archivos texto y si quiere mandarlo a mí para verlo.
Now, obviously, there may be some code in the module that you don't want to share with me. That's fine. You can edit that before you send it and just save that file. So you could edit any of this out.
Si hay código que no quieren compartir por alguna razón u otra, pueden editar este archivo text antes de enviármelo.
Okay, we're going to have another. Oops, made a mistake there.
Ahora vamos a hacer un otro ejemplo.
Just looking at another one. That will clear the previous results.
Y aquí en ese ejemplo, nuevamente, una llamada desconocida, un declare, que no se encuentra en el archivo Microsoft.
And that's got a different unknown name as well. So the scanner also checks for library files, the DLLs, which are unusual. I've got a collection of about 20 ones which are very, very common. And if it finds something which is outside of those, it will send a report as well, which details what file, what DLL that is. It's to collect information so that we can know for the future and then check whether there is a 64-bit version available of that DLL. I've discovered a couple so far which there definitely aren't.
También el scanner busca ver si hay unos DLLs desconocidos y he encontrado a dos para las cuales no hay una versión de 64 bits, pero no es muy común.
Excuse me. Right. Yes, the two which I have discovered which they haven't got 64-bit available. There's one which Stefan Laban's used for combining PDF files. He also created PDF files way back in 1999 using API, a special API, but that we can now do with built-in things, but we don't have the facility to add PDF files together. So it will tell you that that's been found.
Por ejemplo, uno de esos archivos para los cuales no hay una versión 64 bits es uno utilizado por Stefan Laban, que combina archivos PDF.
The other one which I have found is a VB6 file, which is used for some rather unusual functions, and that is not available in 64-bit. But fortunately, the function which is mostly used is actually now built into Access Office in general. So there is a workaround for that situation.
Y la otra para la cual no hay una versión 64 bits es una DLL de VBA6 que se utiliza para algunas funciones raramente utilizadas. Afortunadamente, esta función ahora ha sido integrada en Office. Entonces, la funcionalidad de este DLL ya se encuentra en Office mismo.
So we're now moving on to how to update these using my updater. We've got our sample which had 38 declares in it. So we're going to run the updater.
Ahora, utilizando mi herramienta actualizadora de declaraciones, vamos al ejemplo que tenía 38 declaraciones desconocidas y utilizar la herramienta para actualizarlos.
So this is the one we looked at, which had all that red in it. Oh, yes, because I tested it earlier. So that's why that message came up. Now, in the full version of this, rather than my development version, it will actually ask you whether you have a backup, because this is going to change your code. So if things were to go wrong and you hadn't got a backup, you could potentially have a little bit of a problem.
Es importante que tengan un backup de su aplicación antes de utilizar el actualizador, porque el actualizador cambia el código en la aplicación.
Right, so we're now going to process those 38 declare statements and adjust the code as well. So we'll have to wait for a few seconds. I think it's
Ahora está analizando y procesando el código y cambiar las declaraciones de conocidos, perdón, las declaraciones 32 bits a 64.
now what it's doing at the moment is generating some text forms, some test forms, so we can test that the conversion has actually worked okay, rather than having to actually go through the database and find which functions are called up where. We'll forget about the warnings for the moment. And I will open that database that
Ahora vamos a abrir la base de datos actualizada y tal vez como han visto, ha generado automáticamente formularios para verificar los cambios.
we can see up here that we've got our test forms.
Y ven aquí a la izquierda.
These are the modules which are included in this.
Y los módulos.
Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at the code and I'm going to compile it. And I know there's going to be a couple of minor problems. Now what's happened here is that the get cursor, which is stored in the big text file and in my viewer, uses the structure that the type, the user-defined type called point L. But in fact, up here, he originally used point API.
El problema aquí es que en el código original, el get cursor post utilizaba point L. Es un tipo definido por el usuario, pero como he demostrado arriba, el tipo debe ser point API.
I've used the original from the text file rather than what was in there to make reference easier if you want to look up any details on the internet. So obviously it can be any name you like actually in the as type, but that obviously will not be useful for doing a web search. So point API you wouldn't find, whereas point L you would. And we'll compile.
Prefiero utilizar los tipos normales, digamos, porque se pueden encontrar en una búsqueda por internet para ver más información sobre el tipo.
And we got one other same situation.
Y un otro.
And now there's no problems. It will compile.
Como
So
han visto en esa situación era un problema con letras minúsculas. Y ahora se ha compilado sin ningún problema.
So we'll go for the simplest one, the return username.
Ahora otro ejemplo, get username.
And if we click this button, you can see it's returned the username.
Y como han visto, ahora funciona bien.
Now the color dialog we can open, and that's opened. And if we choose a color, say OK, it will return that value there. There are some optional parameters, but I haven't included those in the test because I just want to prove that the thing is working rather than it's fully functional. But that would be potentially useful information.
Yo incluyo en los formularios generados por mi actualizador parámetros opcionales, por si acaso quieren verificar utilizando unos parámetros opcionales.
Obviously, setting the clipboard is a fairly common thing. Put any old text in there, store it on the clipboard, and then we can do a get, proving that the clipboard function has worked there. The clipboard is one of those cases where there's about 10 functions all combined together to actually have the desired effect.
En este ejemplo de poner algo en el clipboard y luego recogerlo del clipboard. Y el uso del clipboard es un ejemplo en donde se combina una decena de declaraciones para utilizarlo, como ven aquí en la pantalla.
There's the functions which are declared for working on the clipboard. Now, this one is an interesting one. This is a Stephen Leban's example. It's calling up the line number of which you've selected in a combo box. There are better ways of doing it now, but in 1999 it was the only way to be able to do it.
Peter, what was the gentleman's name?
Stephen Leban's.
Aquí un ejemplo de Stefan Laban del 1999. Así hecha hace unos 24 años. Y también aquí ven que ha sido actualizado.
He did an awful lot of API work. Some of it is horrendously complex, and some of it you don't need anymore, but it's still about in a lot of places, I'm sure.
Él ha trabajado, este señor Stefan Laban ha trabajado mucho con los APIs en los años 90 y existe muchas implementaciones de su código en varias aplicaciones de Access. Alguna funcionalidad ya no es necesario porque ha sido incluido en Office, pero se puede encontrar porciones de su código en muchas aplicaciones.
Now I've lost my form here. Nothing to do with APIs. Something to do with the way it's centralized or not, isn't it? Just trying to auto center, yes.
Él les pide un momento.
No, still missing it. Any helpful access suggestions there?
Are you using multiple screens or?
I am using multiple screens. But
It might be buried somewhere under.
yeah. Bear with me just a minute.
Suele pasar con ventanas modales que tienen en multipantalla. Tendría que poner editar pantalla y en cambiar la posición de la pantalla que quite el modal para que aparezca bien.
Yes.
That's better. I just did a move 0, 0. I don't know where it went. But,
Un poco de VBA, una respuesta para todo.
so what this does is you choose a line and it just reports the number.
Este ejemplo nada más le da el número de la línea en un combo box.
Now I chose this one deliberately because it's got a situation where we actually have a difference between 32 and 64-bit, and long pointer doesn't actually work for this situation. So we have to have a conditional compile of if win64. So our original code just had one line, but the updater has added this conditional in here and put the two different declares in there.
Aquí en este ejemplo pueden ver algo que sucede, no es muy común, pero una simple traducción a long pointer save, no ha funcionado. Entonces, en este caso, el actualizador automáticamente pone una sección de compilación condicional. Si Windows 64, sino otra declaración. Y pueden aquí ver la diferencia.
Now I've just taken that function name. I'm going to look at it in our viewer. And it's found two different versions for that alias. It's got the long one, which is a 64-bit version. And it's got the 32-bit version, which has two values in there rather than just one.
Y como ven aquí, he puesto el nombre del API en mi visualizador. Y como ven, he encontrado dos versiones. Y utilizando las flechitas, pueden ver que este ahora es de 64 bits y el anterior es de 32 bits.
Right. Now we need to find where those functions are actually used.
Y ahora buscar dónde se utilizan esas funciones.
And we find that down in the code, we had to put a conditional compile in because of the two different versions in there.
Y aquí, como ven, en el código mismo donde se utiliza, donde se llama al API, existen también dos versiones, la versión 64 y la versión 32, con esta compilación condicional.
Una pregunta, George. Está poniendo en el condicional Win64 y hay veces que también hemos visto que ponen algo de VB7 o VA7, ¿no? Respecto al código de VB. ¿Hay diferencia o qué utiliza él? ¿Por qué una cosa y la otra?
So he's the question, Peter, is this seems similar to the conditional compile for VBA7 versus other types? Is it similar sort of in principle to?
It is just like the VBA7. Yes.
Sí, es igual.
Yes, it's if you're running 64-bit Office as compared to 32-bit Office. I don't deal with the VBA7 because that is so well out of support that I'd rather not get involved with it unless it's absolutely essential.
Sí, dice Peter que es igualito. Él lo trata con VBA7. Dice él que es muy viejo, fuera de soporte y prefiere no complicar su vida con eso también. Pero sí, es igual y se podría utilizar igualmente.
Muy bien, gracias.
This one in the 64-bit version, it uses a function to transfer the values. This has all come from the Windows text file. So that's doing this point to long, and that's a user-defined type in there.
Y interesante, no solamente ha cambiado el API, pero también en el ejemplo de 64 bits utiliza otra función que también viene de este gran archivo texto de Microsoft para convertir el punto en long.
Okay. So that was the reason for using this form that we'll never ever use because there's better ways of doing it, is to illustrate that there are very few occasions where you actually do have to use that Win64 conditional compile. I think it's only about 12 out of the 1,500 declares which actually have 64-bit and 32-bit versions of them. So very few cases where you'll actually need to put in the conditional compile.
Si no me engaño, son solamente 12 APIs en este archivo de más de 1,500. Solamente 12 necesitan esa compilación condicional.
Obviously, with these test forms, they're being deliberately all named with a test so that we can highlight them and delete them in one hit. So rather than getting mixed up with other things, they'll be in a block. Now, we've got a case here where we have 32 and 64-bit. We also have cases of declares where there are different parameters used. There's certainly some where we have a user-defined type in the parameters, and sometimes we use the user-defined type, and sometimes we use a long, because it depends on how it's used. So I've got one.
Ahora un ejemplo donde no solamente a veces tenemos dos versiones de 21 de 32 y otro de 64, pero también un ejemplo donde los parámetros son diferentes.
This is one which I've come across in use, and it has a dev mode parameter in here. It's a create device context. And there are 4 different varieties of this. We've got this as an any type parameter in here, which was a dev mode there. We've got one where it's put in as a long. And we've got another one as a long.
Entonces aquí en esto, create device context, como ven, hay un parámetro aquí que es dev mode. En el siguiente, el parámetro es any.
Now, I've developed a naming convention that I'm using. You can call it anything you like. The alias has to be what's in the DLL, but this name of function can be anything at all, so long as it's a name which Access VBA can use. But if you just give it some name which doesn't have any meaning to it, you don't actually know what's changed. What I'm saying is that the 4th parameter, because I start at 0, as VBA programmers do, has got a type of any rather than whatever it was in the standard version. So this is the version.
Go ahead. Yo tengo un sistema de nombres de funciones. El nombre después de alias, create de DCA, tiene que ser el nombre que se encuentra en este archivo de Microsoft. Pero el nombre de función es algo que uno puede escoger. Yo tengo la convención de, por ejemplo, aquí pongo el tipo que cambia en el nombre de la función también, para que cuando yo vea el nombre de la función, yo sé, eso es la versión que tiene como parámetro un tipo any.
So that originally had a dev mode there. And this one has got an any. It's preferable not to use any if we can avoid it. Any can be any type of parameter, but then VBA is unable to check when you're calling the function whether the data you're supplying is acceptable or not. Worst case is that Access crashes, unlike the old days when the blue screen of death came up, but just crash Access these days usually. So safer to avoid any and use a specific type.
Solamente como punto de información, es mejor no utilizar el tipo any, que permite cualquier tipo de variable, pero con Access, cuando se hace la compilación, es posible que Access termina si un tipo utilizado en llamando a la API no es aceptada por la función.
I think about it as why we don't use any, same way as we don't use variants in code in VBA, because we could declare everything as a variant and then just let it fall over when we put in a character when it should have been a number. We specifically type things to avoid that kind of thing.
Semejante a la recomendación de no utilizar el tipo variant en VBA se podría utilizar para todos los variables, pero eso sí que puede introducir problemas con la aplicación.
Okay, we're going to go back to the updater and have a look at some of the other things that we've got in here.
Ahora volviendo a la herramienta actualizadora para ver otras funcionalidades de la aplicación.
We have a number of options, and now I'm stuck because it's in Spanish.
Aquí ven las opciones, pero ahora me doy cuenta que en español no sé lo que quieren decir.
Puedes traducir tú, George.
Adjust code in calling procedures. Aggregate test procedures. Maintain element type names.
Yes, I can look it up in a minute.
Keep parameter names in your declarations. Test the number of registries.
Right, yeah. Working from the bottom there, the number. That was a special that I had for somebody. They were using record count as an integer because a long time ago you could have a record count which returned as an integer, and so all their code is based on a record count as being an integer, and there was a lot of places where that occurred. They know that the number of records they're returning is only a very small number, so it's never going to be a problem. It doesn't need to be a long. So using that, it allows a C int to be inserted automatically in any place where it's required.
Esta opción abajo es había alguien que utilizaba el número de record count, que anteriormente era el return value de datasets. Entonces esta opción fue para él, para introducir un tipo C-int en el código.
Yeah, the next one up there, that's maintaining the name of the parameters. And on the odd occasion, people in their calls have actually used the name of the parameter, then with the colon equals the value. And when I introduce my declares, I use the names from the Microsoft text file, because then again, that is easier to look up if you're looking up on the web and make sense of. So I've only been caught once with that, but that is something which does happen.
Esta segunda opción, yendo de abajo para arriba, meter nombres de parámetros en declaraciones, yo lo tengo aquí porque había alguien que cambiaba los nombres de los parámetros y yo prefiero utilizar los nombres de parámetros que están utilizados en las declaraciones. Entonces, aquí es para no cambiarlos si alguien está utilizando nombres de parámetros especiales.
The next one up is user-defined types. That's a case where we actually do want to keep the names which are in the original code, because and the elements of the types, because you will be using particular elements with a dot name in the code. So if we change the names in the type definitions, it requires a lot of changes down in the code, which could be a little bit confusing.
El tercer ejemplo de abajo para arriba es de no cambiar los nombres de elementos de tipo definido por usuario. Por ejemplo, se puede definir un tipo y luego utilizarlo en el código. Y es mucho trabajo cambiar no solamente el tipo en la declaración, pero también en donde se llama el código a la API. Entonces, esa opción mantiene los nombres de tipo definido por usuario.
Comentaba que llevamos 1 hora y 10 y tendríamos pues, todavía unos 10 minutos más como mucho para comentárselo a Peter.
Okay, Peter, he says about 10 more minutes.
Okay, yeah. You can tell I could go on for hours on this.
Está bien, dice él, podría seguir adelante por horas y horas, pero 10 minutos está bien.
This one over here, it automatically creates a text file version of the before and after code so that you can do a comparison of the before and after. I don't know whether, well, with 10 minutes, we might come back to that in a minute. Exclusions. Obviously, when you're updating, you might want to exclude some of the modules because they've already been updated correctly. So you can do that by using this page.
Aquí pueden excluir módulos que uno no quiere que estén actualizados por una razón u otra.
Some code you will always want to exclude. VB Watchdog and VB Mappy from Everything Access, because he's got it right. So there is no need, or it's pointless to try and adjust his code. These other 4 come from very, very complex example that I've found. I can't remember who it is, the author, but those ones don't want to be changed because they are incredibly complex.
Y aquí exclusiones permanentes que nunca deben de ser actualizados. Por ejemplo, un ejemplo de VBA Watchdog.
Analysis is just telling us what the name of the functions are which are being used, our 38 functions, what their alias name is, which module they appear in, and whether they're classed as public or not. And most of them weren't.
Aquí el nombre de la creación, el alias, el módulo en que se utiliza y si es público o privado.
That's updates. So once files updates, once scans have been done and files submitted, I will in due course produce an update file which can then get fed back in by clicking this button. We've got nothing in here at the moment. Well, there's no updates available at the minute.
So this will automatically call your updater and pass in that file, is that correct?
I will, once I have created a file, it will then feed those into the tables internally in here.
Okay. Aquí después del análisis, aquí pone una lista de los archivos para actualizar y oprimiendo el botón de actualizar hace la actualización.
I'm not sure whether I was clear there. That's for the declare statements. So for the ones that which were unknown in the scanner, we can add so that they are known and can, in this automatic updater, they can then be used correctly.
Ah, thank you. Yeah. Entonces aquí es donde aparecen declaraciones anteriormente no conocidas, y una vez que se ha hecho la actualización una vez con, por ejemplo, una declaración desconocida, se puede añadir aquí en una lista y se actualiza automáticamente en el futuro. Como si era desconocida y ahora es conocida.
And down here, that allows us to compact the database, or this database, on exit. I've deliberately kept all the files, or all the tables within the database to avoid support problems of people having lost the back-end database. So sometimes it might need compacting.
Okay, es la opción para, no sé, compactar la base de datos al salir de la aplicación.
And this is just giving you warnings of types of problems. Not much use to you at the moment because it's not in Spanish, but that's coming.
Okay, so this comes from a table of warnings that you have written that you use in response to errors or problems when it does an analysis.
Problems it's finding, yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a parameter which is a different type from the one which was in the original. So this is what we discovered earlier, where we'd called the name choose color, and it was choose color struct in the original file.
Okay, okay. Aquí se puede configurar advertencias en texto para las advertencias y todavía no están traducidas en español, pero dice Peter que lo va a hacer.
Okay. I don't know whether you want to see what has been changed in some of these files.
¿Qué tal, Juanjo? ¿Hay tiempo para ver algunas actualizaciones o ya estamos a tiempo?
Sí, sí, si él lo ve adecuado, sí.
Okay, yes, I'd like to see a couple as we wrap up here. WinMerge.
Available for free. A very, very useful comparison. Yeah, let's look at that combo one.
Y aquí, utilizando la herramienta gratis WinMerge, se puede ver el archivo original a la izquierda y el archivo actualizado a la derecha.
So we can see it's added these types, but it's prefixed them with 32 to 64. So you can see that there has been something added. In fact, there wasn't any change there, but we'll come down to one where this, here we go. We can see this bit with the conditional compile. So that was the original. And this is what we've got
Aquí ven el original a la izquierda y donde está su cursor, un ejemplo de esta compilación condicional hecha automáticamente.
So you can see most of them are just added pointer safe, but there are a few other bits and pieces which have changed.
Como pueden ver, la mayoría de los cambios es de añadir pointer safe, pero también otros cambios también.
Now, in the calling code, what I have done is when there is a user-defined type, I have prefixed it with UDT. So it then becomes clear what it is, because you have to have the parameters of the correct type in the actual call. So far easier to have them prefixed with a meaningful type.
Lo que él hace en la actualización es de cuando hay un tipo definido por usuario, él le pone UDT antes del nombre del variable, del parámetro, para indicar muy claramente que es un tipo definido por usuario.
And obviously when this type of naming convention, which has been around for a while, was invented, there wasn't a long pointer. So I've just called him LPT for long pointer. As you can see, there's a fair amount of minor changes going on. Very tedious to do manually.
Como pueden ver, una cantidad de cambios no enormes, pero necesarios. Y imagínense hacer todo eso manualmente y no utilizando una herramienta como el actualizador que él tiene.
That's probably enough now, is it? We've got some questions.
Muy bien. Hombre, la primera pregunta que se me surge es, a las otras dos ha dicho que eran gratuitas y esta última también es gratuita o cuánto cuesta.
So he wanted to ask, he said the first two tools that you showed, you mentioned were free. This third one, is it also free or does it
No,
cost?
afraid not.
No, desafortunadamente no. So where does, Peter, can you tell where one would go to get these tools?
I will have to supply you a link on that, won't I? Which I haven't got to hand.
Pop a browser up on the screen. And...
Yeah.
Y la otra pregunta es, ¿dónde encontramos estas herramientas?
You can go via my website.
Okay, a su sitio de web, what is your URL?
It's www.thememydatabase. Let me.
Okay. Theme my database, is that .com, .org, .net?
.co.uk, but .com would do.
Okay. All right. Aquí tienen el site.
But that's not that one. That's the one. Sorry. That's the link.
Great. Entonces aquí viene el botón en azul, download our free access API and scanner and viewer. And okay, so aquí, so Peter, here you have the free downloads of the scanner and the viewer, and then the updater. Y luego abajo en azul más claro a la izquierda, para detalles sobre actualizar, por favor, entre en contacto con nosotros. So somebody clicks that to email you, Peter, about the
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Y con ese botón azul claro, se envía un email a Peter para detalles sobre el actualizador.
What I should say on the scanner and viewer is I've only finished the Spanish versions today. well, haven't even finished, as you've seen. There's a few bits and pieces to do. So if you download at the moment, it would be English only.
No ha terminado con la versión en español, entonces el download aquí en azul, download our free access API scanner and viewer, esa es la versión en inglés.
So
would somebody email you about the Spanish version, or?
That's probably best at the moment. It'll be the next few days and then it will be available. So, yes.
Okay. Si lo quieren muy pronto, enviarle un email, pero le espera tener la versión en español disponible aquí en el site dentro de unos días, una semana.
In fact, if somebody's interested, I can supply it to them and they can look at the proper Spanish translations rather than the Google ones and make adjustments if they want to.
Y si alguien quiere verificar la traducción automática hecha por Google en la versión actual en español, con mucho gusto.
Perfecto. Más preguntas, chicos.
Any questions?
Se han quedado todos callados.
Everybody is silent in awe.
Yo no sé si preguntar, porque igual está un poquitín fuera de lugar. Yo no he hecho la migración, entre otras cosas, porque utilizo librerías externas que son de 32 bits y tendría que pagarlas, tendría que andar mandando 2 librerías. Y este lunes en el sitio de No Longer Set han aparecido unos comentarios sobre para qué utilizaba la gente Twin Basic, y entonces Ben Claudia decía como que utilizaba Twin Basic para a ver, que lo voy a buscar. Utilizaba Twin Basic para poder acceder a las librerías de 32 desde un Access de 64. ¿Os suena algo? ¿Hay alguna solución parecida?
¿Es una pregunta para Peter o para el grupo? No sé si...
Para el grupo. Para el grupo. No voy a ponerle, no sé si...
Yo no he oído, o sea, he leído el artículo, pero no he visto ningún cambio. Y por supuesto, al estar todavía el Twin Basic en fase de casi ya lanzamiento, pero todavía en beta, no me he puesto a investigar más.
El comentario era exactamente, lo pongo en el chat, porque si lo leo en inglés va a ser peor. Bueno, a ver, el chat.
Mientras
Peter,
pone eso...
Oh, go ahead. Andale.
En el chat lo he puesto en inglés. Y escribió una consola de exe para ser usada para comunicar 64 bits con Access con 32 bits library. I brought a console exe to be used for communicating from 64 bit access to 32 bit library. ¿tenéis alguna experiencia con esto? ¿Habéis hecho algo parecido?
Yo no.
Pues
Peter, he just put in the chat window something about some sort of console executable that can be used for access, 64-bit access to talk to 32-bit libraries. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that.
Dice que no tiene conocimiento de este.
vale.
Muy bien.
Pues nada, me había quedado
Con ganas.
me había quedado con ganas.
Muy bien. Peter, how many times have you need to do this app? ¿Cuánto tiempo has necesitado para hacer toda esta aplicación?
How long did it take you to build this app, Peter?
How long has it taken me? About two years.
2 años.
Wow.
It's a lot more involved than first it appears. It's adjusting the code, which is the difficult part. The getting of the declares was interesting, but not too hard. Getting the user-defined types out was a bit more interesting, but actually getting the code, because I've got to allow for all the different ways that people are programmed. So it's quite involved. And then behind that, of course, is the work on actually finding out the unknown declares, because there's a few appearing which aren't in that 1550 list. I've added about 100 extras, which I found from assorted places, but there's still quite a few out there which need versions which are 64-bit. So I'm working on being able to get that information from a combination of looking at the Windows SDK, the developers kit, finding the C++H files, which are the header files, and then finding the documentation off the web and grabbing the actual information you need. Have we got just a minute longer? Can I get back to the viewer again?
Para terminar, él quiere enseñarlos algo del viewer. Sure, go ahead. Dice él que tomó 2 años, pero más relativamente fácil fue el escáner y la visualizadora. Más difícil, evidentemente, la actualización del código, porque tienen cada uno tiene su propio estilo. Y también está este problema de APIs desconocidas, de APIs no comunes.
También deciros que me corrija Peter si estoy equivocado, pero creo que él también ha estado detrás o al lado en toda la parte de los ejemplos del Watchdog y el editor de ventanas de Watchdog, ¿no?
So Peter, you involved in samples for Watchdog and that sort of thing also?
Sorry, do I do what?
Were you involved at all with examples or samples with using VBA Watchdog?
Yes, I've done extensive work on VBA Watchdog. Yeah, I've got not in Spanish yet. I have something. Obviously, you have to buy your license from Everything Access, but I have got something where, with about 4 clicks, you can add VB Watchdog to a database.
Sí, lo comento porque en el ejemplo que hicimos el año pasado en el encuentro presencial, el archivo que vimos era de Peter.
Juanjo says that when they were doing a VBA Watchdog thing in the presentation last year, the example they had your name on it. So,
right.
Juanjo, lo siento mucho, tengo una reunión en 1 minuto.
Sí, nosotros también, ya se nos hace muy tarde.
Lo siento.
Entonces, Peter, coméntale que ya es tarde, tenemos que dejar ya la charla, pero que gracias por el tiempo.
Okay, great. Peter, I have a hard stop at 3:30 in about 20 seconds here, and so I'm going to have to take off. But Juanjo says thank you so very much for the presentation. It was excellent, and very much appreciate all your work and your willingness to speak to the group today.
Okay, well, I love talking about it. You can tell.
Dice él con mucho gusto, le encanta hablar sobre los APIs y el trabajo de hacer la conversión 32 a 64.
Perfecto, pondremos pondremos sus ejemplos, sus links en el vídeo y por supuesto pues no dudéis en consultarle. Gracias a todos. Thank you very much, Peter. Gracias, George, por la traducción.
Hasta la próxima.
Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
Adiós.
Adiós.